The key turned silently in the lock, not in my hand, but in theirs, for the last time. That icy certainty, a bitter triumph, settled deep within my chest as I pictured them, oblivious, preparing to violate my sanctuary one final time. 35 seconds. That's all it took for the click, the creak of the door, the familiar invasion. But this time, they'd find only silence, an empty echo, and a single cryptic note. The air in my new apartment, miles away, felt cleaner, lighter, though my heart still pounded with a mix of fear and exhilarating freedom. This isn't just a story about moving, it's about reclaiming a life that was never truly mine. Have you ever felt so suffocated that disappearing seemed like the only option? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you connect with this struggle for independence, please consider subscribing. It truly helps this channel grow. I remember the exact moment the idea solidified, not as a desperate thought, but as a cold, calculated plan. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, sun slanting through my living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I'd just arrived home, exhausted from a long shift, only to find a perfectly folded load of laundry on my bed, my underwear, neatly stacked, intimate, and exposed. My mother's signature scent, a cloying mix of lavender and reproach, still clung to the fabric. My blood ran cold, then boiled. I hadn't given her a key. I hadn't invited her over. She just let herself in, again. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, an escalating series of invasions that had begun subtly when I first moved out, a naive 22-year-old yearning for autonomy. My parents, always a suffocating presence, had initially feigned support for my independence. They helped me find my first tiny studio, even co-signed the lease, a gesture I mistook for benevolence. In reality, it was just another leash. The first time, it was a surprise visit to drop off homemade cookies. I was out, but later found the cookies on my counter and a faint scent of their cologne in the air. Harmless, I told myself, just worried parents. Then came the checking in calls, escalating from daily to multiple times a day. If I didn't answer within 2 rings, a torrent of texts would follow, demanding my whereabouts, my companions, my plans. My phone became a digital tether, vibrating with their anxiety and control. I tried to explain boundaries, gently at first, then more firmly. Mom, Dad, I appreciate your concern, but I'm an adult. I need my space. Their response was always the same. A wounded sigh, a lecture on how much they sacrificed for me, how ungrateful I was. The guilt, a familiar shadow from childhood, would creep in, making me question my own needs. The physical intrusions began soon after. A missing item from my pantry would reappear, replaced by a healthier alternative. My mail would sometimes be opened. Accidentally, darling, I just assumed it was for us. Once, I came home to find my furniture rearranged, my small living space transformed into something more aesthetically pleasing in their eyes. Each time, they had a reason, an excuse, a justification that chipped away at my sense of self. We were just worried about you, sweetie. We only want what's best. We're your parents. We have a right to know you're safe. I changed the locks, twice. The first time, a stern conversation about privacy, met with tears and accusations of locking them out. The second time, I did it in secret, hoping the new, unduplicated key would finally grant me peace. It lasted less than a month. One evening, I received a text from my mother. "Your plants look a bit dry. I watered them for you." My stomach dropped. I rushed home, finding the door unlocked, the telltale signs of their presence everywhere. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. How? How did they get in? I later discovered my father, a former locksmith hobbyist, had simply picked the new lock. He saw it not as a violation, but as a challenge, a testament to his parental vigilance. "You can't keep us out, honey. We know what's best for you." The humiliation was a slow, agonizing burn. They'd comment on my grocery choices, my dating life, or lack of it, since who could I bring home with the constant threat of parental inspection? My personal space wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, spiritual. They burrowed into every crevice of my life, leaving no corner untouched by their judgmental gaze. I remember a particularly awful instance when I was trying to date someone new. We had a lovely evening, and he walked me back to my apartment. The next morning, my mother called, her voice dripping with disapproval. "He seems nice. That did you really need to bring him home so late? What will the neighbors think?" I froze. She must have been watching. The thought sent shivers down my spine. The relationship, predictably, withered under the intense, unspoken scrutiny. Who could thrive in such a transparent cage? I made countless sacrifices, silently, hoping to appease them, to earn a modicum of freedom. I worked extra hours to afford a nicer apartment, thinking perhaps a more secure building would deter them. It didn't. I avoided dating, convinced that any potential partner would be scrutinized and ultimately driven away. I stopped pursuing hobbies that might take me out of reach for too long. My life became a carefully curated performance designed to minimize their interference, to present an image of compliance and predictability. But the truth was, I was dying inside. The constant anxiety, the feeling of being watched, the perpetual state of hypervigilance, it was exhausting. My sleep was fractured by nightmares of them standing over my bed, rifling through my drawers. My appetite vanished, replaced by a constant knot in my stomach. I was fading, a ghost in my own home, a prisoner of their love. The tension in my life became a palpable thing, a taut wire stretched to its breaking point. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar car parked on my street, every unanswered call from them sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I felt like a child again, perpetually grounded, every move monitored. My friends grew distant, weary of my excuses, my inability to commit to plans, my constant paranoia. How do you explain to someone that your own parents are the biggest threat to your peace? They'd offer well-meaning advice, just talk to them, set boundaries, but they didn't understand. My parents saw boundaries not as lines to respect, but as challenges to overcome. The idea of moving, truly disappearing, had been a whispered fantasy for months. It felt extreme, a betrayal of the family unit, but the alternative was a slow psychological death. I started saving every extra penny, working double shifts, eating instant ramen. This wasn't just about moving, it was about escaping a psychological prison. I researched apartments in other cities, far enough to make spontaneous visits difficult, but not so far as to completely sever ties. A lingering, irrational fear of their wrath still held me. I chose a small, unassuming building, a place where anonymity was a virtue. The planning was meticulous, a clandestine operation worthy of a spy novel. I started packing in secret, small boxes hidden in the back of my closet, filled with essentials. I drove them to a storage unit, piece by piece, under the cover of darkness. I told no one, not even my closest friends, for fear of a slip-up, a casual mention that would find its way back to my parents. The weight of the secret was immense, but it was also a shield, protecting the fragile hope that was beginning to blossom within me. Each packed box, each trip to the storage unit, was a tiny act of rebellion, a step closer to liberation. I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and terror. What would they do when they found out? The thought sent a chill down my spine, but the alternative, staying, was far more terrifying. I found a new job, a remote position that allowed me to work from anywhere, another layer of security in my escape plan. I changed my bank accounts, my phone number. A prepaid burner phone became my temporary lifeline. I meticulously untangled every thread connecting me to them, one by one. It was a painful process, like severing a limb, but I knew it was necessary for survival. The sacrifices were immense: the emotional toll of constant deception, the financial strain of duplicate rent for a short period, the sheer exhaustion. But the image of my future self, truly free, kept me going. The final day arrived, a blur of frantic activity and quiet determination. I had taken a day off work, telling my parents I had a migraine and needed to rest. It was a lie, of course, one of many I had perfected. I called the movers, a small, discreet company, and watched as they carefully loaded the last of my furniture, the few pieces I had left in the apartment. As each item disappeared, a heavy weight lifted from my shoulders. The apartment, once a symbol of my brief independence, then a cage, now stood empty, a blank canvas for a new beginning. I walked through the silent rooms, touching the walls, the cold windows, bidding farewell to a chapter of my life I was desperate to close. And then the note. I had drafted it weeks ago.